James Earl Ray. The name alone evokes a chilling sense of recognition, a shudder down the spines of those familiar with the annals of American history. He is a man forever linked to one of the most devastating events in the nation's past, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. On April 4, 1968, the world watched in horror as the champion of civil rights was brutally gunned down. The assassination sent shockwaves through America and the world, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. In the wake of the tragedy, the hunt for the perpetrator became a national obsession. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in its history, pursuing every lead and chasing shadows across continents. The eyes of the world were fixed on the unfolding drama, desperate for answers, for justice. At the center of this storm was James Earl Ray, a career criminal whose life had been a tapestry woven with petty theft, prison breaks, and a growing resentment toward society. His name, once lost in police blotters and prison records, was suddenly plastered across newspapers and television screens worldwide. He became a phantom, a specter haunting the American psyche, a symbol of hate and violence. But who was James Earl Ray? What led him down the path of such a horrific act? To understand the man behind the crime, we must delve into the shadows of his past, tracing the trajectory of a life that would ultimately intersect with destiny in the most tragic of ways. James Earl Ray's story begins far from the national spotlight in the rural backwaters of Ewing, Missouri. Born into poverty in 1928, Ray's childhood was marked by instability and neglect. His family drifted from town to town, struggling to make ends meet, leaving young James feeling rootless and lost. School held little appeal for him, and he soon found himself on the wrong side of the law. Petty theft and delinquency marked his early teenage years, a foreshadowing of the darker path that lay ahead. At the tender age of 16, Ray received his first taste of confinement, sentenced to a Missouri reformatory for stealing a truck. This marked the beginning of a revolving door of incarceration that would come to define much of his life. Each stint in prison seemed to only solidify Ray's criminal inclinations, hardening him against the world outside the bars. He became a master of escape, slipping through the cracks of the justice system time and again. His crimes escalated in audacity, from petty theft to armed robbery, each act a desperate grasp for control in a life spiraling out of control. By the mid-1960s, Ray was a wanted man, a fugitive on the run from a string of offenses. He drifted from state to state, assuming aliases, and living a life shrouded in secrecy and paranoia. It was during this period of isolation and desperation that Ray's simmering resentment toward society began to fester, fueled by a toxic mix of racism and anti-establishment sentiment. His journey towards infamy was reaching its tragic crescendo. James Earl Ray's early life was marked by instability and poverty. Born in 1928, Ray's family struggled with poverty. His father was prone to drunkenness and crime. His mother struggled to keep the family together. They moved frequently, always evading creditors. Young James found solace in petty crimes. School held little allure for him. He joined other troubled youths in theft. Their petty crimes escalated over time. Ray became a skilled thief. He was adept at hot-wiring cars. His crimes brought him a sense of control. At 16, he faced his first serious arrest. Sentenced to Missouri State Reformatory, the experience solidified his criminal inclinations. Prison exposed him to a darker underbelly. Here the seeds of his future were sown. The Missouri State Penitentiary, a sprawling complex of imposing stone walls and guard towers, became Ray's new home, a stark symbol of his descent into the abyss of the American penal system. Life within its walls was harsh and unforgiving, a relentless routine of menial labor, meager rations, and the ever-present threat of violence. Ray, hardened by his upbringing, adapted with surprising resilience. He learned the unspoken codes and hierarchies of prison life. His intelligence and determination drew the attention of seasoned criminals. They saw in Ray a kindred spirit with potential. Under their tutelage, Ray mastered deception and manipulation. However, his growing criminal sophistication deepened his alienation. In 1948, after 4 years, Ray was paroled but soon reoffended. Sentenced to Leavenworth, he resolved to escape and forge a new destiny. Section 3: The Making of a Fugitive: Escape and Alienation. Leavenworth, one of America's most secure prisons, presented a formidable challenge. Ray approached the task with meticulous planning and steely determination. He spent months studying the prison's routines and identifying vulnerabilities. He befriended other inmates to gather information and resources. In 1952, Ray saw his opportunity. He procured a hacksaw blade and cut through his cell window bars. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped past the guards and scaled the walls. His escape sent shockwaves through the prison system. James Earl Ray had transformed into a fugitive, a phantom thumbing his nose at the authorities. On the run, Ray embraced a life of anonymity, drifting from state to state. He lived a solitary existence, haunted by the constant fear of capture. His interactions were fleeting and superficial, marked by distrust and paranoia. The world had become a hostile and unforgiving place, fueling his alienation. Over the next decade, Ray's criminal activities continued with heightened caution. He engaged in a series of robberies and burglaries, staying one step ahead of the law. His exploits failed to bring him satisfaction or a sense of purpose. He remained adrift, searching for something to cling to, a cause to ignite his anger. Little did he know his path was about to intersect with a pivotal moment in American history. Section 1. The Gathering Storm, Racial Tensions, and Ray's Growing Resentment. The 1960s, a decade of upheaval, shaped James Earl Ray's worldview. America grappled with segregation and racial injustice. The civil rights movement, led by Martin Luther King Jr., demanded equality. Peaceful protests met violent resistance, exposing deep prejudices. Ray watched these events with fascination and disdain. His experiences with poverty and incarceration fueled his cynicism. Ray gravitated towards extremist ideologies. The civil rights movement represented everything Ray resented. He saw it as a threat to the established order. As Dr. King's influence grew, so did Ray's animosity. King's message of love contrasted Ray's worldview. Ray saw King as a dangerous agitator. In King's prominence, Ray saw his own failures. Fueled by racism and paranoia, Ray entertained extreme thoughts. He saw himself as a lone vigilante. His hatred for Dr. King became an obsessive desire to silence him. The stage was set for a tragic collision course. Section 2. The Rise of Dr. King, a beacon of hope and a target of hate. Martin Luther King Jr. stood as a beacon of hope for millions, advocating for love, nonviolence, and equality. Born in Atlanta in 1929, King rose to become a pivotal figure in the civil rights movement. His powerful speeches, including the iconic "I Have a Dream," continue to inspire. Inspired by Gandhi, King led peaceful protests against segregation and discrimination. From the Montgomery bus boycott to the March on Washington, his commitment to justice galvanized a generation. Despite threats, King remained steadfast, believing justice was worth any sacrifice. In the spring of 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, to support striking sanitation workers. The city, with its history of racial tension and labor unrest, was a tinderbox waiting to ignite. King saw the workers' struggle as a microcosm of the larger fight for economic justice. On April 3, King delivered his final speech, "I've Been to the Mountaintop," at the Mason Temple Church in Memphis. The speech, delivered with urgency, spoke of his own mortality and his faith in the ultimate triumph of good over evil. "I may not get there with you," he told the crowd, "but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." The following day, April 4th, King prepared to leave his room at the Lorraine Motel. He stepped out onto the balcony, engaged in conversation with colleagues, unaware that a lone gunman lay in wait. James Earl Ray, driven by hatred, had stalked King for weeks, waiting for the opportune moment. He had rented a room across the street from the Lorraine Motel, transforming it into a sniper's nest. As King stepped onto the balcony, Ray saw his opportunity. The moment had arrived, the culmination of months of planning and festering hatred. A single gunshot shattered the early evening calm, its echoes reverberating through the streets of Memphis. The bullet from Ray's rifle struck Martin Luther King Jr., sending him crashing to the balcony floor. Chaos erupted as King's companions rushed to his side, their cries mingling with sirens. The news spread like wildfire, igniting grief and outrage across America and the world. The man who preached nonviolence fell victim to the hatred he sought to eradicate. Cities erupted in riots fueled by decades of oppression and injustice. James Earl Ray, his mission accomplished, slipped away, disappearing into the city. He became the most wanted man in America, his face on wanted posters nationwide. The manhunt for Ray spanned 2 months, crossing continents and captivating the world. King's assassination marked a turning point, highlighting America's deep divisions. King's dream of a just society seemed to die with him on that Memphis balcony, yet King's legacy lived on, inspiring future generations to fight for equality. His words continue to resonate, a testament to hope and belief in human good. The world mourned a visionary leader while Ray remained hidden in plain sight. The fugitive tethered to his crime by an invisible thread of guilt and desperation. King's assassination left a void many feared would never be filled. The gunshot that echoed through Memphis on that fateful April evening signaled the start of a desperate race against time. James Earl Ray, his hands stained with the blood of a martyr, vanished into the sprawling urban labyrinth. In the immediate aftermath of the assassination, with the city in lockdown and law enforcement swarming the streets, Ray moved with a chilling blend of cunning and cold-blooded calculation. He had meticulously planned his escape route, studying maps, memorizing bus routes, and preparing for every contingency. Shedding layers of clothing to avoid detection, discarding the murder weapon, Ray melted into the throngs of people. His face, soon to become infamous, remained unnoticed, lost in the sea of shock and grief that washed over the city. He moved like a phantom, a specter haunting the edges of the unfolding drama. Ray's escape was a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness, but it was also aided by the chaos and confusion that gripped Memphis. Communication breakdowns, conflicting eyewitness accounts, and the sheer scale of the manhunt all played into his hands. Ray disappeared into the vastness of America, leaving behind a nation grappling with its grief and a burning thirst for justice. The manhunt for Ray would span 2 months, crossing continents and captivating the world's attention. As days turned into nights, the manhunt for James Earl Ray intensified. He traveled under assumed names, staying one step ahead of the law. Ray's journey took him to Canada and then London, living a shadowy existence. He frequented seedy pubs, scanning newspapers for any mention of his name. The world mourned Martin Luther King Jr., while Ray remained hidden. Ray's escape was aided by the chaos and confusion in Memphis. He disappeared into America, leaving behind a nation in grief. While James Earl Ray drifted through the streets of London, believing himself to be beyond the reach of justice, the manhunt for him escalated to an unprecedented scale. The FBI, driven by a combination of national pressure and a thirst for redemption, poured resources into the investigation. Ray's image, captured in a stark mugshot, was disseminated worldwide, plastered on wanted posters, flashed across television screens, and printed in newspapers. He became a household name, a symbol of hate and violence, the target of a global dragnet that grew tighter with each passing day. As the weeks turned into months, the pressure on Ray intensified. He realized that his freedom was a precarious illusion, that the walls were closing in, and that his time on the run was nearing its inevitable end. Mistakes, however small, began to creep into his carefully constructed facade. He grew careless with his aliases, leaving a trail of false identities in his wake. In a cruel twist of fate, it was Ray's pursuit of a more permanent escape that ultimately led to his downfall. He had set his sights on Rhodesia, a country ruled by a white minority government that he believed would offer him sanctuary from extradition. However, obtaining the necessary travel documents proved to be his undoing, bringing him into contact with individuals who would ultimately betray him. Ray's time on the run came to an abrupt and unceremonious end. After 2 months on the run, living a nomadic existence fueled by paranoia and desperation, James Earl Ray's flight from justice came to an end at London's Heathrow Airport on June 8, 1968. The net that had been slowly closing around him finally tightened, snapping shut with a finality that echoed the gunshot that had forever altered the course of history. As Ray attempted to board a flight to Brussels, using a false Canadian passport in the name of Ramon George Sneyd, a sharp-eyed customs officer noticed a discrepancy. The name Sneyd was on a watch list, flagged for its potential connection to the King assassination. The officer, alerted by his suspicions, detained Ray for questioning, his simple act of vigilance bringing to a close one of the most intense manhunts in history. The news of Ray's capture sent shockwaves around the world. For 2 months he had been a phantom, a shadow flitting across continents, a constant reminder of the act of hate that had shaken America to its core. Now, he was a captive, a tangible symbol of justice, albeit a flawed and controversial one. Ray's capture did little to quell the controversy surrounding the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Questions lingered, doubts persisted, and conspiracy theories flourished, fueled by a deep-seated belief that the full truth about that fateful day in Memphis remained shrouded in mystery. Yet, for the millions who had mourned King's loss, Ray's capture offered a semblance of closure. A tangible manifestation that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, justice, however imperfect, could still prevail. James Earl Ray's capture marked a new chapter in a saga that captivated the world. Extradited to the U.S., Ray was at the center of a media frenzy. The nation demanded justice for Martin Luther King Jr., but Ray's trial was complex and controversial. The 1969 Memphis trial was a spectacle. Ray, gaunt and haggard, faced first-degree murder charges. The prosecution, led by Percy Foreman, built a case on circumstantial evidence. They painted Ray as a racist driven by hatred. Ray's defense team faced an uphill battle. Public sentiment was against Ray, and the evidence was damning. They argued Ray was a pawn in a larger conspiracy. They questioned witness testimonies and ballistic evidence. Their attempts to shift focus from Ray's guilt were unsuccessful. The prosecution's narrative held sway. The jury found Ray guilty of King's murder. He was sentenced to 99 years in prison. The clang of the prison gate closing behind him marked the beginning of James Earl Ray's final chapter. No longer the phantom that had haunted headlines and fueled international intrigue, he was now inmate number 38,309, confined to a world of concrete and steel. Ray's life in prison was a study in contrasts. He was a high-profile inmate, his every move monitored, his every visitor scrutinized. Yet, he was also a man shrouded in a cloak of infamy, feared by some, reviled by others. He received death threats, was the target of assaults by fellow inmates, and lived with the constant knowledge that his notoriety made him a marked man. Despite the harsh realities of his confinement, Ray never stopped proclaiming his innocence. He granted interviews, penned letters, and collaborated on books, all in an attempt to control the narrative of his life. He claimed he was a pawn in a larger conspiracy, a small-time crook manipulated by powerful forces operating in the shadows. His claims, often contradictory and lacking credible evidence, were met with skepticism by law enforcement and dismissed by many as the desperate ramblings of a guilty man seeking to rewrite history. However, his assertions, fueled by a mix of genuine belief and a desire to salvage some semblance of dignity from the wreckage of his life, found an audience among conspiracy theorists. Those who refused to accept the official narrative of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Ray's life in prison was a study in contrasts, a high-profile inmate, his every move monitored, his every visitor scrutinized. Section 3. A Legacy of Questions, Ray's Claims and the Search for Truth. James Earl Ray died in prison in 1998, but questions about his role in Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination linger. Was he the lone gunman or a pawn in a larger conspiracy? Investigations and conspiracy theories abound, implicating various entities. Even King's family expressed doubts about Ray's sole guilt. The search for truth continues, shrouded in mystery and doubt. The enduring shadow of James Earl Ray. James Earl Ray. Even in death his name evokes a visceral reaction, a shudder through the collective memory of a nation. Was he a hardened racist or a patsy in a larger conspiracy? His trial left lingering doubts and unanswered questions. Ray's legacy is intertwined with Martin Luther King Jr., a chilling reminder of the fragility of progress. Yet King's light continues to inspire hope and the fight for equality. Section 2. Ripple Effects, the Assassination and the American Soul. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was a blow to the soul of a nation grappling with its identity. King represented the best of America, the embodiment of its highest ideals. His murder exposed the deep-seated divisions that threatened to tear the nation apart. Cities erupted in violence fueled by decades of oppression and injustice. King's death seemed to signal the death of hope. Yet his legacy endured. His teachings continued to inspire future generations. The civil rights movement found renewed strength in his memory. The assassination remains a searing reminder of the fragility of peace. Yet it also serves as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As we reflect on the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., we are reminded that the choice between love and hate is one that each generation must make. The future is shaped by the choices we make today.